Hello and welcome. This is RPG Coaching. My name is Lori, and this is the place where you are right at when I educate parents regarding video games of their children. Now, before this episode, I talked about online and offline games. I talked about game genres in a specific, in a generic way, like fantasy, sci-fi, and nowadays. But now we're gonna deep dive into the game genres, as there are many other, let's call it subgenres, as well within RPG, within sci-fi, within real time or real life modeling games. And the very first, or which I would like to address, is something which is called FPS. Yeah, you heard it right. It's called FPS, and it is the first person shooter. Now, bear with me for a moment. I know it sounds really frightening, like, oh, my kid is playing first person shooters. And yeah, I admit first person shooters are not for each and every age range of a child, especially which contains not only just slashing monsters but also other virtual human beings. So you have to be really careful. If you see that your child is playing an FPS, you need to do a research, like that game is rated for that age of your child or not. Yeah. So what is an FPS, and how you can see that your child is playing an FPS? FPS, first person shooter, is called when you see, and I'm pretty sure you also saw a movie, whether in TV or on Netflix or whatever, where you can see that the camera is moving from the character's point of view, and you can see the hands of the characters and what the hands bear in it, like a gun, a rifle, a pistol. Yeah, that is a first person shooter angle from which also many games doing their own plays, like FPS, first person shooter games. Yeah, most of those games can be found online and offline as well, of course. It's again another question for you to ask from your child, whether he or she is playing online or offline. And before you go, and judge FPS games, note this: there are esport games huger than the Olympics. Yeah. And one of the categories of the esports games are first person shooters. And have no doubt about it that those gamers who are playing esports games and within FPS are highly trained virtual athletes. That's true. Yeah. So, but let's go back to your child. So, if you can see that the camera is moving from the perspective of the character, and you can see only the character's hands or only the character's weaponry, which can be also played in a fantasy environment, then you can see a sword or a dagger or a sword and shield or a spear or a crossbow or a longbow whatsoever. Or even in these modern times, you can see also a handgun, a rifle, etc. If it plays in sci-fi, then from a lightsaber going to a laser blaster, you can see pretty much everything. So this is how you can realize that your child is playing an FPS, first person shooter game. But did you know that actually the very first FPS games, first person shooter games, were made in around 1973? So old this genre is. Yeah? Were you born already that time? Okay, so I'm just asking, yeah? So what you can do when you realize, one, that your child is playing an FPS, and two, how you make your child, to move away from the computer and start to spend some real quality time with you and with your spouse. First of all, you need to make sure that your child is playing online or offline, because the rules for an online FPS games are different than an offline version. Yeah, in most of the cases, if your kid is playing an online FPS, that means that he or she is playing with a group of people in a virtual, world, obviously, and they are split into, most of the time, two teams. Yeah, and the goal is to win over the other team, or there are other game modes, for instance, capture the flag or something like that, but I will talk about it also in another episode. So if your kiddo is playing online and you can see that there are two groups fighting each other, then there is a good chance that he or she cannot enter or exit immediately the game, because there are some rules, there are some, numbers, like players within the two teams, which need to be kept. And of course, if your child is leaving the game, there are already somebody waiting on the servers to come in and join the game, but that wouldn't be that fun for your child, right? So if you realize that, first, it's a first person shooter, second, your child is playing online, then first you need to ask, like, when they will have finished um, that topic, like, I mean, that stage, because there are some stages also inside an online game, like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, which can differ regarding landscape and so on and so forth. And between the switching of the stages, yeah, the player has the choice to exit or enter the game without, punishing their teammates with, with one people less. Yeah, so that would be the very first question, at least from my point of view, if you realize that your child is playing an FPS. The second question, if it's an offline game, then there is a different approach, because offline first-person shooters can be saved at some checkpoints, which is called inside the game checkpoints. Reaching something within the game which leads to automatic save of the game. Or a second, the game can be saved anytime. Yeah, and if it's so, then you can ask your child, like, are you playing offline? Can you save it now? Okay, if you do so, can you join us? And maybe you can continue later or next day from that point. And that can, oh, shit, that can lead also that can lead also to a really deep conversation when you start asking those kind of relevant questions. Yeah, I hope it helped. All right, I hope it helped. And if you like this video, just give it a thumbs up, hit the subscribe button, don't forget the notifications to be turned on, follow me on Instagram, follow me on Facebook, and if you have some specific questions, don't hesitate to send me a DM. I would be happy to answer it right away. Okay, with that being said, have a lovely day, and see you and hear you in the next episode. Bye.